What's going on YouTube? It's Derek. Welcome to my channel, Euro Superbike Life. Today I'm bringing you something a little bit special. Today I'm out on my brother's 2020 Yamaha R1M. This is a brand new bike, stock. I think it only has about 200 and some odd miles on it. He let me borrow it for the day. As you can see, no gas in it. Cheap bastard, you. But anyway, I initially planned on doing a complete ride and review of this bike, but this bike has been out for a while, and you know, a number of YouTubers and motorcycle publications have already done reviews of this bike. So what is it that I could tell you that they haven't already? And the answer is probably nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ride the bike and give you my impressions on the bike as compared to my other motorcycles that I own and my brother owns. You know, the RSV4, BMWs, MV Agustas, and so forth. So sit back, relax, and join me for this ride. We'll go and put some petrol in this bike and then take it for a spin, see how it does. I will say this, that a few weeks ago my brother and I drove out to Pennsylvania, small town in the middle of nowhere, PA, to pick up this bike, and it had exactly 0 miles on it. I've never had a 0-mile bike before. He's had it a couple of weeks now and had to wait to get it registered because everything's by appointment here because of COVID. But he's had it on the road for about a week now, has a couple hundred miles on it. And one thing we noticed with this bike was that it was heavy to wheel around. I think it tips the scales at about 450 pounds wet, which is actually kind of odd for a top-tier Superbike. We both think it's because of the, primarily because of the 4 catalytic converters on it and the extremely heavy exhaust system. But that's really only cat back because it actually has titanium headers. So if you're thinking about putting a full exhaust system on this bike, you may want to consider just putting a cat back system on, removing the cats and going titanium back to the muffler, because the headers are already titanium, so you're not going to get any louder, or excuse me, lighter. They may make them bigger so you flow a little bit better, but it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So by changing the headers, it's probably a waste of money. So I wouldn't do it. But you definitely don't feel the bike's weight while you're riding it. Sort of like the Aprilia RSV4, which is a heavy, porky bike, but while you're riding it, you don't feel it. This bike has 4 riding modes, which are completely configurable. It probably makes sense that they don't call them, you know, range, street, race, slick, things of that nature like BMW and its competitors do. The power modes on this bike are completely configurable, so I think they call them A through D, so A, B, C, and D, and you can set them up however it is you want. You just have to remember which is which. I think by default A has the is the most powerful unrestricted mode, but again, you can set that up to do whatever the heck it is you want. Bike obviously has a quick shifter and auto blipper. Well, let's pull into the petrol station over here. Fill her up. All right, we are all filled up. Let's go take her for a ride. Now, you guys know that Euro Superbike Life is all about European sport bikes, but obviously today we're out on a Japanese sport bike. It's not that I don't like Japanese sport bikes or other manufacturers' sport bikes, it's just that I prefer the European brands. There's something about them that excites me that the majority of the Japanese bikes do not. However, I will say that of the Japanese Big 4, I do think the Yamaha R1 is the best looking of the 4. Now, looks are subjective. There's no right or wrong answer. Some people love the CBR, aka Fireblade. Others are Gixxer riders through and through. But for me, if I had to buy one, based on looks alone, I think it would be this R1M. I think it's a really good looking bike. A lot of the Japanese manufacturers tend to go over the top with the colors and the graphics on the bike, so you can't actually see the lines of the bike. Suzuki is really good for that. Yamaha has done it in the past, occasionally, not as much. But particularly Suzuki and Kawasaki, they tend to go way over the top, and you can't actually see the lines of the bike. Yamaha has taken a more of a European approach. Solid colors, beautiful lines of the bike. Now, when this bike first came out in 2015, it had those hideous, ugly bug eyes, and it still does. It still has those hideous, ugly bug eyes that sort of look like they were an afterthought. But the bike has gone through a bit of a redesign, and they sort of recessed them back and hidden them a little bit. So this version looks a lot better. The 2019-2020 version of the R1 looks a heck of a lot better, in my opinion. More aggressive, overall sharper bike. This bike has everything the more modern sport bikes have. TFT display, all the rider aids that you can ever possibly want. As you know, my brother owns a bunch of bikes. He has a Panigale R, this bike, MVF4, and a newer Aprilia RSV4. And in my opinion, Aprilia's V4 engine is the smoothest bike on the planet. Smoothest sport bike. The thing just does everything really, really well. There's no herky-jerky hesitation in anything. There's no vibration being transmitted back through the clip-ons or anything like that. The bike accelerates well, it stops well, it turns well, it does everything really, really well. And I had to describe that bike in one word, it would be smooth. Having ridden this bike for a couple of weeks now, my brother, not me, he seems to think that this bike is smoother than the Aprilia. And we're going to put that to the test. I don't actually think so, but we'll see. Yeah, this bike definitely needs an exhaust. It is way too quiet. The bike definitely accelerates well. And it feels light on its feet. Its suspension is done well. I'm not crazy about the brakes. They're not Brembos. I don't know who actually makes Yamaha's brakes. I don't know if it's Nissan or somebody else, or if they make them. I'm not crazy about the brakes, but it does accelerate very well. At least in this mode, how he has it set up. There's no hesitation from what you do with your wrist to what the bike does. That I like. But this bike, in mode A, it looks like we're in power mode 2. Traction control is currently set to 6. It looks like the slide control is set to 1. Engine braking is set to 1. And this guy is killing me. But there's definitely no delay, and you twist the throttle, it wants to do stuff. Now, handling wise, I'd say it's compatible, or comparable, excuse me, to the RSV4. Probably even feels a little bit lighter, easier to turn in. We're gonna go ahead and go buy these people because this is ridiculous. The upshifts and downshifts are a little abrupt. Again, I'm not saying this is good or bad, just in comparison to the other bikes that we have, that we own. That's what I'm noticing. I think the Ducati and the Aprilia shift a little bit easier, a little bit less abrupt. My RSV4 does not have an auto blipper, but my brother's does, and that shifts super quick, in my opinion. Super smooth. Again, that is the one word that comes up with that bike: super smooth. And yes, I'm probably sounding like an Aprilia fanboy, and I probably am. However, it's a fantastic bike. So when I ride other bikes, that's primarily what I'm comparing it to, the other bikes that I like. Bike seems to be geared very well. I'm in second gear, and second gear on my Aprilia, and keep in mind that on my Aprilia I've changed the gearing. So in second gear, it revs out a little bit more. This is cruising along quite nicely, which makes sense. And looking at the specs on this bike, one thing I did notice that is probably not talked about are the intervals for the valve check and adjustment. So this bike, I believe the first valve check and adjustment is at like 20 some odd thousand miles. I think it's like 22 or 24. Don't quote me on that. I'll put that on the screen somewhere right now, because I know you guys will flame me if I give an incorrect spec, which is actually pretty phenomenal. I think the first valve check and adjustment on my 2013 RSV4 comes in about 12.5. I haven't done it yet, I think, or maybe it's sooner. Again, don't quote me. I'll put it on the screen, but I know I'm overdue, and I think I have about 13,000 miles on that bike. Again, I'll put it on the screen. But that's twice as long as the Aprilia. Ducati is a lot sooner. I don't know about the V4 because I haven't checked on that, but my brother's twin in the 1199 Panigale that I used to own was a lot sooner than 20 some odd thousand miles. So that's actually pretty cool. And because my brother has 4 bikes, and we live in the greater northeast part of the country here where we get snow, the riding season's only about 5 to 6 months long, there's a good chance that he'll never reach the 20,000 miles that are needed to do a valve check and adjustment on this bike. So he'll probably never do one. Now some of you are saying, see, that's why I buy Japanese. They're so, the service intervals are farther apart, and they're a lot less expensive. Yes, that tends to be the case. However, I think it's a moot point in my opinion. You take the average rider probably puts, or at least in New England, the average rider probably puts somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 miles on their bike. And you're talking several years on, say, an Aprilia that the first service interval is about 12.5, I think. Let's say it's 12.5 for argument's sake. It'll take you several years to get to that point, and then I think it's about, should all of your valves need adjustment, I think it's about $1,000. Not to do the entire service, just the valve check and adjustment. But let's say all of your valves on your RSV4 need adjusting at that time. You're talking $1,000. We're talking $1,000 over the course of several years. We're talking dollars a day. Not a big deal, right? With this R1M, it's even less, because you're talking 20,000 miles before, I think, or 22 or something like that, before you have your first service. I don't know what a valve check and adjustment costs on this bike, but let's say it's $700-800. Again, we're talking a few dollars, a few pennies a day. So again, not a big deal in my opinion. Now, if you live in Arizona and you were like me, you rode all the time, where you could put 10,000 miles a year on your bike. Let me figure out where I'm going here. Where you could put 10,000 miles a year on your bike, that probably means on an Aprilia, you're doing a valve check and adjustment yearly. Whereas on this bike, you do it every other year. Again, is that a big deal to you? I'm betting if you're in the position to own an R1M or a top tier Aprilia RSV4 factory, then $1,000 a month, $1,000 a year for valve check and adjustments, probably not a big deal if you ride that much. Yeah, there's definitely a bit of an abruptness to the upshifts and downshifts. And this is the clutchless upshifts and downshifts, not clutched. A clutch shift is going to be as smooth as you are. By the way, I have no idea where I am right now. Yield. Don't see anyone coming, so I think I'm good. Good thing I have my phone. That way I can pull over to find out where the heck I am. Odd place for a stop sign. But okay. New England roads, created by goats and cows. Nice little pond area. One-lane bridge. Oof. Oh, but this bike feels really good. I could definitely see myself owning one of these. Although I do really have my eye on that new S1000RR. I may wait a year or two before I get one. Let them work out the kinks of the early ones. All right. Now, mind you, we are still under 600 miles on this bike. Let's see, we have 289 miles on the clock right now. So we don't want to push this bike too hard. Try to keep the revs respectable and cycle through the gears, not stay at 1 RPM. But this is a very nice bike. Very nice bike is on my first or initial impressions. The seat is very slippery. I know it gets a lot of complaints that it's hard, which it is, but all Superbike seats are hard and uncomfortable. They're not made for cruising. So if you find yourself uncomfortable riding a super sport bike, well then I would say, duh. If you want to be comfortable, buy a cruiser. Buy a naked bike. These bikes aren't meant to be comfortable. They're really meant to be on the track. Although I would like a seat that's a little bit more grippy. But there is a lot of room, I'll say that. I could slide way back here and slide way up front. So there's a lot of room to move around on this bike. And believe it or not, even though the only thing I could see in the mirrors is my elbows, I had to do the chicken wing thing, but they're actually usable once you get your arm out of the way. They don't flop around, they're fairly sturdy, so they're not the best looking mirrors in the world, but they are usable. The TFT display is a little bit small, but super clear. Lots of information on there. No, I don't know why. My brother never likes to adjust the suspension. He doesn't set sag for his preference or the seat height. So everything is default on this bike, and the bike is really hard and the suspension's really stiff right now. I would soften it up a little bit, particularly seeing this bike will never see the track most likely. So I would soften it up for easier street riding that's a little bit more comfortable. This is what I'm saying about New England roads. I'm probably 10-15 minutes from my house. In Arizona, I'd have to travel an hour from my house before I could find it. Clearly, this is where you do all types of burnouts and stuff. But I'd have to travel an hour to find a road like this. Actually, the roads right around my house are phenomenal. So. Alright, let's find a place to pull over. Get some shots of the bike. A really good looking bike. There's all the carbon fiber here in the upper fairing. Front fender, back here in the rear cowl, rear fenders. It really should have had more. This lower portion here is also carbon fiber. It should have had a carbon fiber belly pan, and this piece here should have been carbon fiber. It has Olin suspension. Like I said, those headers, I believe, are titanium. Love the wheels. Very good looking bike. He has number 814. Out of how many, I'm not sure. Let's get back on and go for a ride. Like I said, accelerates really well. Brakes are a little mushy for me, but for street riding they would do just fine. I think swapping them out for a nice set of Stilemmas and a Brembo master cylinder would be on order. But the bike handles very well. Very smooth from that perspective. We've got 300 miles on it now. Only halfway to go. I think my nephew has like 200 of them on here. He rides it more than my brother. Alright guys, well I think I'm gonna wrap this up for this video. So parting shots of this 2020 Yamaha R1M. Very good bike. I haven't had the pleasure of riding the other Japanese bikes, but this one is a good one. I would love to add this bike to my collection. Alas, I don't need to because my brother owns it, and it is in my collection. I can go down there and ride his bikes whenever I want. So technically this is my bike as well. But this is an awesome bike, guys. You might want to consider adding one of these to your collection. Very good bike. In my opinion, not as smooth overall as my RSV4 or my brother's RSV4, but overall, very good. Bike handles well, accelerates well, TFT display, all the rider aids you can possibly want, and low maintenance intervals and schedules and so forth. So what is there to lose on this bike? Phenomenal to look at, phenomenal to ride. Anyway, I'm Derek. This is Euro Superbike Life. You guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, or smash it if you didn't. Hit that subscribe button and the little bell. Until next time, guys, take care.